Hello everyone. So my name is Akal, and what I want to teach you today is I'm going to teach you the difference between ejaculation, ejaculation control, and non-ejaculation. And there's a big difference. And really what this is it has to do with one's personal approach to that, to your sexual energy, right? So if you're a dude, right? So ejaculation. Ejaculation is, it's obvious, very obvious. It's a discharge. A discharge of what? Fluid, but energy as well. And that's the issue here. So a lot of men, at some point in their life, they may come to the point of they're experiencing erectile issues or, whatever it may be, or they just feel generally their energy is off. They feel unbalanced. They feel depleted, whatever it is. And so eventually we start to kind of look around of what have I been doing? Because that's the reality. If you're feeling depleted, it's something you've been doing. You're not eating right. You're not exercising. You're not taking care of your body. In a lot of cases, dudes are ejaculating too much. And so one of the things I generally recommend to all men, particularly the men who go through my Sovereign Male program, which, by the way, the link is down below the video. If you're interested in the Sovereign Male program, go check it out. However, what I'm teaching these men is that it's essential. In my opinion, it is essential to do a 40-day period of time in which you abstain from ejaculation entirely. And so when you're going through this 40-day period of time to abstain from ejaculation, the reason 40 days is so important, yes, it's a biblical thing. 40 days is tied to many traditions, spiritual traditions. However, as I was getting my master's degree in exercise physiology, we learned that, so let's say I'm doing bicep curls. So day one, doing bicep curls. You start doing bicep curls on an everyday basis. Sometimes the thought is that, I'm going to increase muscle cross-sectional area. That's not the case. The muscles don't get bigger after, for 40 days, unless there's prior training, okay? So someone who has no prior training goes right into lifting weights. They will get stronger, but they will not necessarily get bigger. And yeah, they may get bigger because their muscle is inflamed, but that's different. The muscle tissues have not gotten bigger because for the first 40 days, they got only stronger. They got stronger because the nervous system is adapting. So 40 days is the amount of time it takes the nervous system to take on a new pattern. And that's actually an amazing thing to know. Because if you're trying to change any aspect of your life, your way of thinking, your belief systems, how you eat, et cetera, you got to stick it out for that 40-day period of time. And then you will essentially have a good foundation for change. So I tell men, hey, cut out the ejaculation for 40 days. You're depleting yourself and you need the contrast. We have to have the ability to have a contrast. So you cut out ejaculation, then you can contrast it with how you felt when you were ejaculating all the time, right? Makes sense. So one question that comes up on a regular basis from these men is, what do I do if my sexual energy drives me crazy? Fair question. Does it? It will, to some extent, drive you crazy. The desire is so powerful, right? The desire to release is so powerful. And a lot of men don't want to give up the self-pleasuring, or they don't want to give up sex. So how do you handle this? Well, that's when you need to understand two things: ejaculation control and non-ejaculation. And so I'm gonna handle ejaculation control first. So particularly men who are doing the self-pleasuring during the 40-day abstinence period, you're kind of teasing yourself. So there's two things that are essential. One is the understanding that there's ways to dislodge that energy from the genitalia, and those are sexual transmutation practices. So a lot of the practices I teach, essentially you learn how to gather the energy at the lower dantian, the hara, the navel point. There's different names for that point, but it's about 2 fingers below the actual navel, inside the body, right above the perineum. There's a space that you can learn to deposit energy, and it'll make your belly over time very warm. But that's what we're doing. We're shifting the heat out of the genitals and shifting it into the navel area. And what this does is it takes the concentration of heat out of the genitals, which is one of the reasons why it's so difficult for men to abstain from ejaculation, is because the concentration of energy it's essentially lodged in the genitalia. So it makes them stir crazy. So there's a lot of different sexual transmutation practices out there, and I suggest if you're a man who's abstaining from ejaculation, you look into it. So that's the one thing. The other thing is I have to address edging. Edging is, all right, so it's a double tension. Edging is double tension. I'm not saying don't do it. I'm just simply saying know what you're doing. Because when you're edging, essentially what you're doing is you're creating a lot of friction, a lot of buildup, a lot of heat, right? So this friction, this heat that is built up, it's driving you towards ejaculation. So, in other words, you're never really liberating yourself from the desire to ejaculate. You're only teasing it. You're only building up to this edge and then backing off. So those of you who have more, you have an interest in Tantra, let's say, this isn't a good approach. Now, if you're just interested in not giving up any form of if you don't want to give up self-pleasure, but you want to abstain from ejaculation, then edging is a thing. However, so how can you approach edging so that it's not so, it doesn't make you so crazy? Again, like I said, it will give you blue balls. It will create irritation along your pelvic floor in the penis itself, as well as the prostate area. And this heat, this irritation that builds up, it's not exactly great. It's not exactly healthy. So essentially you're just teasing yourself and you're building all this heat and all this irritation, and there's got to be a way to deal with that, right? So if you're going to choose the edge, know that you're creating double tension. And so you need to have, once again, a transmutation practice, a practice that will dislodge that tension out of the genitalia and shift it to some other part of your being. Again, there's lots of different practices. So, but just keep in mind, so do your searching, do your hunt. Like I said, if you want to contact me, I help men, in terms of like creating a practice that works well for them. So, but do keep in mind, if you start suffering from blue balls, that's why, right? You're doing it yourself. Now, something else that needs to be considered. So those men who are doing semen retention practices for the purposes of building up sexual energy so that they can have profound sacred sexual experiences. Now, those men are doing the non-ejaculation approach. So that has to be understood psychologically first. And what do I mean by that? I mean that you have to, in your mind, remove ejaculation as a goal, right? So this requires that you change your belief systems a little bit. So again, most of us have the pattern of driving through a high friction, high amount of movement kind of way towards a release. So the more shallow your breath, the more you move, the more likely it's going to drive towards release. So if men are doing the non-ejaculation approach and you're like, that is my goal, my destiny is to have tantric experiences, then you have to learn to be cool. And you have to learn to relax. So the relaxation and the cool, well, how does that happen? Well, it happens through less friction. So, and again, if you're like, hey, I'm going to go for 40 days, but I don't want to stop self-pleasure, well, then you learn to self-pleasure in a much more mild kind of way. Hey, why not just cup your genitals? Breathe, feel your genitalia, allow that energy to arouse, but don't cause too much friction, right? Gently massage the genitals, enjoy the pleasurable sensations that rise, contract and relax your pelvic floor, etc., etc. It's about connecting to the genitals in a soft, soothing, gentle, cool kind of way. The other thing is don't ignore the rest of the body. Rub all over your body, whatever it is. Again, give yourself a lot of experience and a lot of feeling. So that is one particular approach in terms of the self-pleasure aspect, if you're doing the non-ejaculation approach. Now, when you go into a sexual experience and you're doing the non-ejaculation approach, you have to have pelvic floor control. And what I mean by that, so you may notice And this can be practiced throughout your everyday life. You may notice that, again, I'm projecting a little bit here. When I'm spinning on something mentally, anxiety, worry, fear, whatever it is, insecurity, these are usually signals that are rising up from the lower chakras, number 1, 2, and 3, right? So first thing I always notice is, oh, what's going on down in my pelvic floor? Almost inevitably, I'm contracted. Like, anal retention is a real thing. Like, if somebody calls you anal retentive, what? They say, oh, you're trying to control everything. You're persnickety. And again, it always rises out of insecurity. So you're probably clenching your anus if if you're trying to control everything in life. So what you need to learn to do is to relax the pelvic floor. I do this 2 dozen times a day, right? Anytime I get stuck in my head, inevitably I'm contracted along my pelvic floor. So I relax the anus, I relax the perineum, I relax the genitals, I relax my belt line, and I just ease my energy down into the pelvis. It's like relaxing my energy down into my pelvis. I now know that sounds a little vague. Like when I say relax your energy, it means essentially I'm allowing my awareness to shift downward. It's a much calmer, cooler place to be. And so again, over time, as you practice this, how it translates into the sexual experience as well is it allows you to not ejaculate, right? And the other thing I have to say is that your partner, whoever you're with, has to be on board. So if you need to have a partner, like if you're doing the tantric approach and the other person isn't, they're going to get frenetic. And if it's a woman, for instance, she'll start moving her hips quicker. She's doing friction, right? She's getting that friction going. And so if she's doing the friction thing, she starts to have orgasms, it'll become very contagious and it'll shoot through you and drive you towards ejaculation as well. So you both need to be on the same page in terms of what you're doing. So that being said, keep in mind that if you have an interest in Tantra, it's a relaxed approach. You need to learn to relax the pelvic floor. And then when you are in a sexual union, it's very little movement, very gentle movement. It's about tuning into sensation, and it's an internal experience. It's a strong inward drive. Tantra is not this whole like external engagement. It's kind of an introverted sort of approach to sex in some ways. You want to stay connected with your partner, so you don't want to be on edge the whole time, right? So if you're having sex and you're like doing ejaculation control, what are you doing? In all reality, if you're working ejaculation control in a sexual experience, you're not connected to your partner because you're too busy riding that edge and backing off. So in a cool, gentle, slow approach to sex, which is more tantric in nature, you're constantly relaxing everything. Because when you relax, it allows the energy to rise on its own volition, on its own accord. You don't have to force it. It's not an issue of control. It's an issue of letting go and surrender. And in some ways, sexual energy is quote unquote feminine or receptive in nature. And so it requires a letting go in order so that it can rise and spread. So that being said, again, if you want to engage sexually in a tantric manner, also keep in mind about the breath. This is the last thing I'll say. Keep in mind about the breathing. So again, you don't need to be controlling the breathing during a tantric sexual experience. You know, a lot of times people would like start focusing on their breathing if they feel like they're driving towards ejaculation. So you don't want to, again, it's not about that. Because then that becomes what you're looking at, right? Again, the whole idea of Tantra is that you're connected. You keep your eye contact with your partner. You're in a place of feeling and sensing and experiencing, right? So the moment you start to focus on your breathing, what happens? Well, that becomes the focus, right? Energy flows to where the attention goes. So what you want is this strong circular current of energy being exchanged between you and your partner. So the way to do that is to not be focused on anything but, right? So you're feeling and sensing and you're staying in eye contact. You're keeping your heart open. You're staying connected with your partner. In this way, like I said, you'll get that current of energy that flows very smoothly between the two, and that will drive you towards these very intense ecstatic experiences, which are all of our potential. It is our natural way of I guess, sexually connecting in a lot of ways. So with all that said, hopefully you've enjoyed the video. Thank you much.